Okay, thanks then. Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can and hopefully you can all see my screen as well.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so yeah, good afternoon. My name's Paul Haynes. I work for RISQS, and thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to come and tell you about the RISQS scheme, the Railway Industry Supplier Qualification Scheme, this afternoon. So we have a short presentation, and today we'll cover 6 main areas. Just a little bit of an introduction to who we are for those that don't know us. What actually is RISQS and how can it help you? How does the audit process work? So as a supplier, when you go through an audit, how does that whole process work from start to finish? And how much will it cost me to do this? And then hopefully, I'm sure we'll have time for some questions and some discussion at the end as well. So just moving on. I'm joined by two colleagues, Susanna Keane and Phil Smith, and they're just going to hello and introduce themselves as well.
Good afternoon, my name is Suzanne. I'm the Commercial Business Development Manager for Supplier Assurance, and it's my responsibility to ensure that the products that we are delivering enhance and encourage health, safety and quality assurance across the industry.
My name's Phil Smith and I'm the Scheme Manager, and I'm responsible for the operational delivery of the scheme.
Thanks, Phil. And as I said, I'm Paul, so I'm the Assistant Scheme Manager. So part of my role is to support the suppliers, buyers and all of our members, and working with Phil to make sure the scheme operates in accordance with its rules. It's not just us running the scheme though, we've got a team of over 30, including auditors and other functions right through from compliance to projects. So we're a big team. So now I'm just going to play a short video that just tells you a little bit more about RISQS.
The rail industry is going through some of the biggest transformations seen in decades. The rising demand for capacity, sustainability and safety, as well as the fallout from the pandemic, means new technology, systems and the need for interconnectivity all bring unique and new challenges. To move forward, the businesses behind Britain's railways must work together, which is where RISQS comes in. We're designed with industry involvement, overseen by independent industry figures and built for rail from the ground up. We give buyers and suppliers an all-inclusive view of the supply chain, and we lowered prices and have kept them low since 2018. We provide a fair and transparent way for suppliers to be recognised as capable providers of products and services. And we present buyers with the widest range of high-quality suppliers, checked, benchmarked and assured. Our innovations make RISQS simpler and more efficient to use. Our API plugs into buyers' purchasing systems. Buyers can use the RISQS platform to shortlist for contracts, and we can help you comply with the utilities contract regulations. Our benchmarking tool lets suppliers see how they compare to their peers. Don't just take our word for it. Network Rail do not use any other qualification system under the Utilities Contracts Directive to select suppliers for auditable codes. This is what a future that benefits us all looks like. This is what RISQS looks like.
Okay. So I hope you liked the video. I think it's a really nice summary about RISQS. So I'll just cover now a little bit in a bit more detail about the RISQS scheme. So as we've said, stands for the Railway Industry Supplier Qualification Scheme, and it was developed back in 1999 after the privatisation of British Railways. So we now have 3,800 and plus supplier members. And if as a supplier, you're actually wanting to supply any products or services to the rail industry, then actually using RISQS will really help. We find that the scheme actually helps you assure the buyers that you're actually managing your risk effectively, and suppliers can search. Buyers can search for suppliers like yourselves as well. It's actually governed by the RSSB, the Rail Safety and Standards Board. So there are a great set of buyers all waiting to view your profile. We have at the moment 89 buyers, including obviously the largest network rail, TfL and freight operators, but then a number of other smaller buyers as well, all looking for companies that they can work with. And we look to increase that number all the time as well. So just in summary, I've mentioned the 3,800 suppliers already seeing the benefits of the scheme. We have the 89 buyers all accessing verified supplier information to help them procure safely and efficiently. And from the supplier side, the 3,800 suppliers all using RISQS to demonstrate their compliance to the industry standards, which helps improve the railway safety and manage risk effectively. So there's obviously a lot of change happening in the rail sector right now, with GB Rail being formed, and the good news is that RISQS is going to continue its role and expand its use. So by being verified and visible, buyers will be able to see your company and see that the trust in your credentials and capabilities. There's also the possibility that by actually going through RISQS, you'll avoid the duplication of other audits, because certain buyers will actually see, as you're a member of RISQ, there's not the need for a separate audit. And also gives you the opportunity to benchmark your performance through using the system, and helps you build relationships with the buyers. So that's a little bit about the actual RISQ scheme. So I'm going to hand over to Phil, our scheme manager, who's going to go through the actual audit process.
Hi, good afternoon. So stage one for any new supplier joining the scheme is the initial registration process. So new suppliers would contact the customer service team, register an interest. From there, they will be provided with their own portal space, which will go on to contain all the SME's company information for the buying community to use. So following registration, a supplier will be required to fill out a RISQS online questionnaire. This stage includes a requirement for the supplier to confirm specific company information, information such as your company location, key contacts, organisational size, and social responsibility policies, to name but a few. There's also a requirement to identify the services that they wish to supply to the industry, and these will need to be selected from the railway industry commodity classification list, which is known as the RIQL codes. And this is provided by the Railway Safety Standards Board and will be part of the portal access that you get. So it's essential that information provided by the suppliers is accurate, it reflects the products and services that they intend to supply, and it provides realistic limitations on the volume and delivery of locations, reflecting not only your documentation, your policies and procedures, but your actual practices. And the reason this is important is because all information that's submitted goes through a verification process. So the online questionnaire goes through the verification process through a team of trained verifiers. They will look at the detail that you submit. If it's satisfactory, then they will pass it. For any specialist information that needs additional knowledge and experience, that will be passed to a specific individual, such as your CDM capabilities, for example, would go to somebody with competence to do that review. So once the supplier data has been verified, the supplier will become visible to the risk buyers community, and the portal itself will assist the supplier throughout the year to ensure that all information that's submitted is kept live and up to date, such as your insurances, memberships and certificates. So anything that becomes expired, the portal will notify the supplier. So following the verification stage, the RIQL profile is checked. Some products and services within the RIQL import more risk to the industry and to a supplier's business, and these services will therefore require an audit. from one of our trained risk lead auditors to identify which codes are auditable and which ones are verifiable. And on the RICL code, or on the RICL list, you'll have an A against the code for auditable and V for those that are verifiable only. So the audit process itself, this is supplementary to both the registration and the completion of the questionnaire. And it will involve an auditor coming to your premises, to the supplier's premises, to validate the information provided in the portal, and then look at the implementation of the management systems that you put in place. All suppliers that are subject to an audit will need to undertake the core module. So the core module becomes the foundation of the audit, and the core module covers your supplier's management systems and contains questions which aim to provide the buying community assurances that the supplier has adequate arrangements for health, safety, environmental and quality controls. Specifically, the core module will cover company structure, management systems, your subcontractor capabilities, project capabilities, management of plant and equipment, risk controls and occupational health. And the specific criteria for the core module is found within the protocols that's on the RISQS website under scheme documentation. So following the completion of the core module, some suppliers will need additional modules depending on the services that they select. So for organisations that intend to work trackside, they'll need to undertake the Sentinel module. For organisations that fall within the remit of the CDM regulations performing construction works, they'll need to undertake the CDM module. For organisations that intend to deliver safe work planning as an activity, then the safe work planning module will be selected. And finally, the POS module applies for anybody that intends to hold a POS licence and manage on-track plant operations. We also have additional modules for anybody that intend to deliver medical and drug and alcohol services. So we've got a medical module, an alcohol and drug collection module, and a laboratory analysis module. So the day in the life of an auditor. So on the day, so the auditor will make contact with the supplier 15 to 20 working days prior to the audit to check, to ensure that you've got the right modules, you've got the right codes, and they've got the right location to come out to do the audit. The auditor will then attend on the designated day. They will provide an open meeting with the senior management team to discuss the plan of the audit, and then they'll conduct the audit in line with the modules that have been selected. The auditor's responsibility is to raise findings throughout the audit as they go along, if there are any, and that doesn't mean it's just non-conformances, it can mean positive elements as well. And then at the end, they'll provide a close-out meeting with the whole team to ensure that any issues have been raised and any actions are put in place, any action plans. 10 days after that, the report will be published on your portal, and that'll be available for the buying community to see how the company performed during the audit. So it's important to recognise that the auditors that come out are not there to fail companies. They're not there to find fault. The auditor's responsibility is to confirm compliance and to provide assurances to the buying community that the supplier has the capabilities to deliver the services that they've selected. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Phil. So now I'll hand over to Susanna Keane, our Commercial Business Development Manager, to talk about the actual sign-up.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. So just to summarise what my colleagues Paul and Phil have already mentioned, RISQS is an entry point for suppliers to the rail industry, and it operates as both a qualification system under the utilities contract regulations as well as an assurance system. We have 89 buyers of products and services across the rail industry who use RISQS as their supplier qualification service, and Network Rail has chosen to use RISQS as its assurance system for suppliers with whom they contract directly. So in short, we are helping and supporting you sell into the rail industry by providing an open, fair and transparent way for you to be formally recognised as a capable provider of products and services. Thank you, Paul. Next slide. My colleague Phil has touched upon the initial registration form. So if you were to visit our website at www.risqs.org, you would be able to click on the join button, and you would complete an initial registration form, which is going to be your company's main contact information. And what that will do, that will enable an account to be created for you, which will then allow you to access the risks questionnaire. Once that questionnaire has been completed with your company information and you've taken the opportunity to select your RIQL code, you'll go through the verification process as described by Phil. Again, it's worth noting that the codes, the RIQL codes, are donated by verifiable and auditable, and those that import higher risk to the industry are subject to an audit. Once that process has been completed, you become visible to the buying community. In terms of how much it costs, the registration process is governed by the number of RIQL codes that each organisation selects. So were you to select one RIQL code, then your annual membership fee would be £349 plus VAT. And then were you to be an organisation that selected over 200 codes, your membership fee would be £1,275 plus VAT. Again, to note, if an audit is required, then an additional audit fee is applicable, and there is a fee per day for the audit. So the number of days of audits will drive the cost of the audit for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's the end of our presentation. So we'd be very happy to hopefully answer some questions or any general points anybody would like to make.
Paul, I can see that there's a question in the chat. I'm not sure if you're able to read it, or I can read it out to you.
Yeah, no, sorry, we can't see the chat, but I'm just about to start sharing the screen, so we can see that now.
Perfect. So yeah, you can just go ahead and yeah, read it out and then yeah, respond to the question.
So is that the first question, or is it? So what? Which one is it?
Just the one at the bottom from Darren. I can read it out to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if there are minor corrections or additions to procedures required identified, will the supplier have opportunity to address prior to confirming outcome and without the need for a whole additional audit? Thanks, Darren. Phil, can you answer that?
It might need a little more detail. So Darren, if you want to get in touch with me afterwards, but I'll try and answer now. If you want to add services within the 12-week window, and it's similar to the codes that have already been selected, then the auditor will review that and will add it on without the need for an additional audit. I think, is that the question?
Yeah, I think so.
If Darren is still on the call, perhaps if he unmutes his mic, can you tell us if that's answered your question, Darren?
Hi there. Yeah, not quite. What I was getting at is if the audit itself identifies some corrective measures or additional procedures needed to comply with the requirements of risks, is there a phase where you can make those adjustments without having to go through another audit, separate audit?
Sure, it depends on the finding that's raised. So if it is a finding that results in a major non-conformance, then you would have a 5-day window to close that out, which would require a re-audit in certain circumstances. Within the risk scheme rules, there are a few areas where a re-audit wouldn't be required. If the finding is classed as a minor non-conformance, which if it's just a slight amendment to a procedure, then that can be dealt with, that could be picked up 12 months time and wouldn't require a re-audit. So we would just, on the renewal audit the year after, we would then just check that all minor non-conformances have been closed out.
So if there's a minor non-conformance, do you have to wait 12 months to be certified, or?
No. No, you'll be certified straight away, and it'll be the supplier's responsibility to close that out in a suitable and sufficient time frame, and then we would just check that you've closed that out when we return in 12 months time, but you will be certified during that period.
Okay, brilliant, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Darren. Are there any other questions from anybody? Isabella, what advice would you give to a company outside of the rail industry looking to break in?
Do you want me to pick that up?
Yeah.
So yeah, we're looking for companies outside the rail industry to look to work within in rail, purely because I think they mentioned in the presentations earlier that a lot of the new SMEs have a lot to give to the industry, a lot of new ideas. So it's certainly encouraged for companies outside of rail to join. In terms of the risk audit, we hold an empty system audit for any new supplier. So if you've not got evidence of having worked in rail before, then we would look at your management systems and capabilities to deliver in rail. So we wouldn't necessarily look at any evidence of previous delivery. We're looking at your capabilities to deliver in the next 12 months. And sometimes the auditor may ask you, have you got any evidence that from a similar industry that's cross-transferable? So if you have done construction work, then that could be used to show capabilities around CDM as an example. But certainly it's an empty system and you wouldn't be required to show previous evidence. I'll just add, so for any new supplier that's coming on board, then if you have a look at the risk protocols that's on the website, as Sue's mentioned earlier, under scheme documentations, the list of criteria for the core module and whether it's sensibly required as well. It's all listed there, where you can then start to build your systems around that and implement into your own business practices in the future.
Okay, and I think we have another question from Steve. Is a tier 1 supplier responsible for a supply chain compliance, e.g. SMEs, or does the supply chain need separate accreditation?
So we do require tier 1s to still have responsibility over their own supply chain. Ultimately, if your supply chain has risks as well, then that covers that initial audit that you will be required to do to show that they've got the management systems to deliver in the rail industry. However, you would still need to monitor and measure your supply chain's performance throughout the year, because ultimately that is the tier 1's responsibility. The risk team wouldn't be able to go out and check on that supplier's performance during a live contract. So that responsibility does still sit with the tier 1, but RISQS would confirm your suppliers have got the capabilities if you mandate that they use RISQS as well.
So there doesn't seem to be any additional question, but maybe I can ask one myself. I guess one question would be, if a company, if need be, if they failed their qualification, what would be the next steps?
Yeah, so if it's a new supplier and they fail, then they would have to go undertake the process again. We do try to push out to all new suppliers that it's really important to look at the protocol, look at the criteria, and make sure you've got systems to meet the requirements. For any company that's a renewal organisation, so they've already undertaken one initial, then they have up to 5 major non-performances. If they get 1 to 5, they have 5 days to close that out. And in certain circumstances, they may have to have a re-audit to check that the closeout actions are being implemented into systems and there's no further risk to the industry. If you get over 5 major non-performances, then that's a straight fail again, and they would have to go back through the process to reapply and rejoin. And as I said earlier in the presentation, the auditors are not looking for failure, they're looking for compliance. So we don't want any new companies coming to the scheme to be frightened of the audit. They obviously need to get the requirements in place, show what they can do. The auditor can then provide the assurances to the buying community that the company that they've just visited are not going to import any risk to the industry, and that they're available for selection for projects.
Does anyone else have any questions? Anyone, maybe someone who recently joined, or anyone, something from a presentation maybe? No
I have one more.
Thank you.
Again. We're a new SME, been working in the industry, rail industry for 20 years with a big consultancy in my background. And we've written a bespoke QMS system and know generally what's required of CDM regulations and working in safe environments. Is there a way we can get some kind of gap analysis so that when we go into the audit, we know that we've covered everything? What's the best way of getting into the process and knowing we've kind of ticked the expected boxes?
Sure, it's not something that we can offer because ultimately we are the assessment services, so we're coming to assess. So the responsibility would be on the supplier to do that gap analysis. But as a bit of advice, I would certainly visit the protocols that are relevant to your business and then cross map against what you do, what you've got in place. Because ultimately we're looking for compliance to the protocols, and the protocols are compliant with the rail industry standards. So that's the first protocol. Pull the protocols apart. Any areas that don't apply to your business, then if you as a business justify why it doesn't apply, then ultimately we wouldn't be looking to raise a non-conformance at that point, as long as it's not in breach of a standard. Because we're not there to dictate on how you are to deliver your processes, we're there to check whether it complies with the requirements. So get the protocols, look at the criteria, and then cross-reference and map to see that you've got adequate processes to cover the requirements there. Is that okay? Does that answer your question, Darren?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. We actually prefer companies to have bespoke systems. We want to see that living, breathing management system, and that it's fully embedded into everything that you do. You know, there has been a problem in the industry where people have had an off-the-shelf system, management system that doesn't necessarily fit in with what you do. So there are red flags in the industry. So the auditors are looking for that bespoke system. So if you do have one that provides that safe process for what you do, then you should be on the right lines at that point. If anybody does have any questions afterwards and prefer to speak to us, then we can certainly pass on our details so that anybody can give us a call or discuss anything a little bit further. Okay.
Does anyone else have any? Oh, there's another question from Isabella.
Okay, could you give a brief overview of how RISQS and Sentinel interact?
Sure. So as part of the Sentinel module, how we interact with Sentinel is we confirm that suppliers have that capability to manage the Sentinel responsibilities. So there is a set of scheme rules for Sentinel, and we are ensuring that the suppliers can deliver in line with them rules. And where they can't, then obviously we would then report into Sentinel, which would restrict the supplier's status and ability to access track. So that's how we interact with Sentinel. And ultimately within our Sentinel module, we're looking around companies' capabilities to manage their staff, their competence, their fatigue levels, the medicals and DNAs. So that's what we do as part of our audit. And then results are then fed back into the system.
And then maybe, Phil, just a quick explanation of what Sentinel is for companies that may not be familiar with.
So Sentinel is a system that controls competency, medicals, and drug and alcohol, and it's basically a passport to access either track side or non-track side. So there is a non-track side element to it as well. But if you once a company registers with Sentinel, uploads the competencies, uploads the medical and DNA, then that gives the sponsored staff the passport to access track. Okay. The Sentinel system, each individual worker, sponsored staff will have a Sentinel card. So every time they do access track, they would swipe in and out so that we've got that controlled access of who is accessing the track. So that's Sentinel in a brief nutshell.
And then just one from Darren there, Phil, confirms primary sponsor status, Sentinel or RISQS?
It's the supplier themselves. So the suppliers will become if they want to sponsor staff, then they become the primary sponsor. If they want to use other primary sponsor staff, then that's where the secondary sponsorship would come in. So ultimately, the suppliers will decide whether they want to be a primary sponsor or not.
Is it perhaps worth clarifying what we mean by supplier in the sponsorship sense, so as not to confuse it with the wider term supplier?
In what respect?
So I think what Phil means when he was chatting about the supplier themselves determines, Darren, for example, if you were sponsoring staff, it would be you that would determine whether you were a primary or a secondary sponsor, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
So for instance, Darren, if you wish to put a team out onto track, then obviously you would undertake the core and Sentinel module. You would obviously register with Sentinel, becoming a sponsor, and then you would then be a primary sponsor of them individuals, and you'll be responsible for the competency, the competency, the medicals, DNAs, and then that ongoing development of that individual as a sponsor.
Do we need anyone to certify that we're able to act as a primary sponsor, which is what I was getting at in the question?
If you undertake the core and the Sentinel module, at that point you'll then obviously have that ability to become the primary sponsor on Sentinel. So it's our Sentinel module that gives you that certification.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, there's another question there from Mark. The presentation highlights if a supplier wants to work directly with Network Rail, you have to have RISQS. To clarify, is this to supply anything to them?
So Network Rail's chosen to use RISQS as its assurance systems for suppliers with whom they contract directly. Under the RIQL, what you will find is there are various safety critical RIQL codes, which are those that require the audit, and there are verification codes. The individual who's going to decide how they're going to use RISQS for the procurement or for the framework they're running will be the individual that's purchasing at Network Rail. So if you have a contact for the product or services you are looking to supply, I would suggest you also liaise with them to understand how they're planning to use the system.
Great, thank you.
Great, and as I've put in the chat, we only have 5 minutes left, so if anyone has any last minute questions, and if not, I don't know if you have any final remarks or any general advice you would give to any companies having to go through the audit process maybe.
So first of all, thank you for joining us this afternoon. The URL for the website is www.risqs.org. As we've mentioned, there's a lot of information on there. There's both a resource centre which provides useful links to other organisations, some of which have already been mentioned on the call, and also to the documents which govern the scheme and which will support you through the process of joining RISQS if that's something you choose to do after today. Thank you.